So let's transition a little bit here into some brief history in the last century for gay men. So what you're going to see is a pink triangle. The pink triangle is a representation that has emerged. It's a symbol of pride in being a gay male. Where did that come from? When we take a look in history, that actually came from World War II, around 1930s, that basically gay men were put in concentration camps, along with women of ill repute and Jewish persons. And they were identified by having some sort of symbolism placed on them, each of those groups. And for gay men, it was the pink triangle. This was another sort of claiming of something that was horrific, was horrible in gay male history, and saying, I'm taking it back and I'm empowering it again. So you may see that symbol out there. It is certainly an important symbol for gay men. We're going to jump forward to the 1950s, and the only thing I really want to mention here, and remember this is a very brief history, is that you probably have heard the magic number that 10% of the community is LGBTQ. Well, actually the 10%, when we look at the old Kinsey reports, and Kinsey back in the 50s was considered sort of our sexual expert. He was actually doing studies that were ahead of his time, and we're talking about, think about 1950s here. We're talking about a time where things were a bit rigid. We liked things to be trimmed and in their boxes, right? So he's beginning to explore sexuality, and what he found was 8 to 10% of the population was exclusively homosexual. So to say that the population of the LGBT community is at 10% is an underestimate. If you just take those statistics, and I've seen it range everywhere from 1% to 10%, and that number is often used to represent the entire community, but we have some evidence here that basically we're just talking about the gay male community. So that's where that magic number has come from. Gay male history, we're talking about things in more current times. Let's move into the 60s. One of the words that I want you to make sure you know is the word Stonewall. So in the 1969, basically these were riots that occurred in New York. The gay bars were often raided in New York. There was a lot of derogatory and demeaning behavior that gay men were put through at that time, and also other persons in the LGBTQ community. And so what happened is they got tired of it. And what I want you to really know about Stonewall, first of all, that it was this riot. It lasted, I believe, about 5 days of true rioting. This really led to the gay male liberationist movements from that point forward, and really a whole growth process for the community of coming out as a collective. 1978, another important time in history, is the assassination of San Francisco Supervisor Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone. What I want you to really know about this as an overview is that often, we talk a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. being this wonderful advocate for the African American, the Black American community, but how often do we hear about Harvey Milk? And for gay men, Harvey Milk is our Martin Luther King Jr. Through the 80s and 90s, what we had really is a backlash, and this came from the AIDS epidemic. People became very afraid. It was associated as being just a gay male illness, and people were afraid of contracting this, and gay males were really the host of this illness. So what you find politically and socially is this get back in the closet. This is where you need to be. We don't want to know. In fact, there were a lot of movement to actually have anyone that had been identified as HIV positive moved off to a place segregated and pushed out. I mean, we're talking about the old concentration camps again, and we're going to put pink triangles on people again. We had DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, come out, which then federally established marriage as a right really only between a man and a woman. We had Don't Ask, Don't Tell come out around that time, and it was in an attempt to actually address some of the issues in the military for LGBTQ persons, and really what it turned into is just another way of identifying and ostracizing and creating dishonorable discharges for gay men amongst other members of the LGBTQ community. Towards the end of the 90s, though, we do see a beginning of a reopening process that's starting to occur. We start to see, we have Will and Grace, and we have movies, and we start to see some positive figures that represent gay males in the community. And really what that's moved into, this opening, has created kind of a new backlash, this sort of sense of get back in the closet again in the last 10, 12 years here. There's a strong push right now by the LGBTQ community for marriage, for addressing hate crimes, and basically military service. In the last 10 years, we've had DADT basically repealed. There has been an addition into the hate crimes laws that represents gender, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And there are at least some states that are allowing gay marriage at this point, but there's also a whole host, quite a few more, that have created bans to gay marriage at this point. So these are important issues that currently you need to be mindful of in working with gay men.